By that time I'm feeling hungry, that's why. इतना कंप्लीट करना तो पढ़ना तो पड़ेगा अभी. Just half an hour. That's it. आप लोग का डिनर हो गया? क्या कर रहे हो? डॉक्टर नहीं, ऐसे ही पढ़ रहा. डॉक्टर नहीं बनना है. पता नहीं चला. द लॉज ऑफ ह्यूमन नेचर. और एक बार लिखा. पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं. अभी काम में दे रही है. हम कुछ बोल ही नहीं रहे हैं अभी. नहीं, वकील में इंटरेस्ट नहीं है. उतना झगड़ा नहीं कर सकते. अगले जन्म में जज बनेंगे. इस जन्म में नहीं हो पाएगा. Invariably, in this case, people thinking is remarkably simple and lazy. Kill Caesar and the Republic returns. Action A lead to result B. A variation on this, one that is quite common in the modern world, is to believe that if people have good intention, good thing should be the result. If politician is innocent, if politician is honest and means well, he or she will bring about the desired result. In fact, good intention often lead to what are known as cobra effect, because people with the noblest intention are often blinded by feeling of righteousness and do not consider the complex and often malevolent motivations of others. Non-consequential thinking is the veritable plague in the world today that is only growing worse with the speed and ease of access to information, which gives people the illusion that they are informed and have thought deeply about things. Look at self-destructive wars such as 2003 invasion of Iraq, the attempt to shut down the American government for short-term politicians, gain the increasing number of financial bubbles from tech stock to real estate. Related to this is a gradual disconnect from history itself, as people tend to view present event as if they were isolated in time. Understand, any phenomenon in the world is by nature complex. The people you deal with are equally complex. Any action set of a limitless chain of reaction. It is never so simple as A leads to B, B leads to C, and D, and B, and beyond. Other actors will be pulled into the drama, and it is hard to predict their motivation and responses. Other actors will be pulled into the drama, and it's hard to predict their motivations and responses. Other actors will be pulled into the drama, and it is hard to predict that motivation, their motivation responses. You cannot possibly map out this change or get a complete handle on consequence. You cannot possibly map out this chain or get a complete handle on consequences, but by making your thinking more consequential, you can at least become aware of the more obvious negative consequences that could ensue and this often spells the difference between success and disaster. You want depth of thinking to go to several degrees in imagining the permutations as far as your mind can go. Often going through the often going through this process will convince you of the wisdom of doing nothing, of waiting. Who knows what would have resulted in history if the compared conspirators had thought this out and chosen to wait until Caesar died naturally or in battle. While this mode of thinking is important for individual, it can be even more crucial for large organizations where there is a lot of where there is a lot at stake for many people. In any group or term, put at least one person in charge of gaming out of all the possible consequences of a strategy or line of action. Uh, Preferably someone with a skeptical and prudent frame of mind. You can never go too far in this process, and the time and money spent will be rewarded as you avoid potential catastrophes and develop more solid plan. Tactical help. You find yourself embroiled in several struggles or battles. You seem to get nowhere there, but you feel like you have invested so much time and energy already that it would be a tremendous waste to give up. You have actually lost sight of your long-term goals, what you are really fighting for. Instead, it has become a question of asserting your ego and proving you are right. Often we see this dramatic in marital spats. It is no longer about repairing the relationship but about imposing one's point of view. At times your spirit drawn downward. This is almost your sign that you have descended into a tactical hell. Find a design for strategic thinking, calculating several moves in advance towards our goal. In tactical health, you can never raise your perspective high enough to think in that manner. You are constantly reacting to the moves of this or that person, embroiled in their dreams and emotion, going around in circle. The only solution is to back out temporarily. The only solution is to back out temporarily or permanently from this battle, particularly if they are occurring on several fronts. You need some detachment and perspective. Get your ego to calm down. Remind yourself that winning an argument or proving your point really get you nowhere in the long run. Win through your actions, not your words. Start to think again about your long-term goal. Create a ladder of values and priorities in your life, reminding yourself of what really matters to you. If you determine that a particular battle is in fact important, with a great sense of detachment you can now plot a more strategic responses. If you determine that a particular battle is in fact important, with a great sense of detachment you can now plot a more strategic responses. More often that not, you will realize that certain battles are not worth it in the end. They are a waste of valuable energy and time, which should be high on your scale of values. It is always better to walk away from a circular battle, no matter how deeply you feel personally invested in it. Your energy and your spirit are important consideration. Feeling pretty and frustrated can have reverberating consequences for your ability to think strategically and reach your goals. Going through the process delineated above in the keys will naturally elevate your perspective and put your mind on the strategic plane. And in life, as in warfare, strategies will always prevail over tacticians. Trigger tape fever. Point three. Trigger tape fever. During the run up to the 1929 crash on Wall Street, many people had become addicted to playing the stock market, and this addiction had a physical component. This the sound of the ticker tape that electronically register each change in a stock price. Hearing that clicking noise indicated something was happening. Hearing the clicking noise indicated something was Hearing the clicking noise indicated something was happening. Somebody was trading and making a fortune. Many felt drawn to the sound itself, which felt like the heartbeat of Wall Street. We no longer have the ticket tape. We no longer have the ticker tape. Instead, many of us have become addicted to the minute by minute news cycle, to what's trending, to the Twitter feed, which is often accompanied by a ping that has its own narcotic effect. We feel like we are connected to the very flow of life itself, to events as they change in real time. And to other people who are following the same instant report, this need to know instantly has a built in momentum. Once we expect to have some bit of news quickly, we can never go back to the slower pace of just a year ago. In fact, we feel the need for more information more quickly. Such impatience tends to spill over into the aspect of life. Driving, reading a book, following a film, our attention span decreases, as well as our tolerance for any obstacles in our path. We can all recognize signs of these nervous impatience in our own lives, but what we don't recognize in the distorting effect it has on our thinking. The trends of the moment in business or politics are embedded in large trends that play out over the course of weeks and months. Such larger spans of time tends to reveal the relative weakness and strength of an investment, a strategic idea, a sport team, or a political candidate, which are often the opposite of what we see in the micro trends of the moment. In isolation, a poll or stock price do not tell us much about the strength and weakness. In isolation, a poll or stock price do not tell us much about these strengths and weaknesses. They give us the deceptive impression that what is revealed in the present will only they give us the deceptive impression that what is revealed in the present will only become more pronounced with time. It is normal to want to keep up with the latest news, but to base any kind of decision on this snapshot of the moment is to run the risk of misreading the larger picture. Furthermore, people tend to react to and overreact to any negative or positive change in the present, and it becomes doubly hard to resist getting caught up in their panic or exuberance. Look at what Abraham Lincoln had to face in a much less technological age. At the outbreak of the Civil War, he looked at the larger picture. At the outbreak of the Civil War, he looked at the larger picture. As he estimated, the North should prevail because it had more men and more resources to draw on. The only danger was time. Lincoln would Lincoln would need time for the Union Army to develop itself as a fighting force. He also needed time to find the right generals who would prosecute the war as he desired. good sense of humor. Very high. हाँ तब तो बोले थे प्रणाम बताने के लिए। यहाँ पे तो टीवी के दिख रहा है बस। बोलो। हाय रूपा। नहीं पूछ नहीं रहे, वहाँ पे लिखा हुआ डीबी के, वही होता है। हाय He also needed time to find the right general who would prosecute the war as he desired. General who would prosecute the war as he desired. But if too much time passed and there were no big victories, public opinion might turn against the effort. And once the North become divided within itself, Lincoln jobs would become impossible. He needed patience, but also he needed patience, but also he needed patience, but also victories on the battlefield. He needed patience, but also victories on the battlefield. In the first year of the war, the suffered a great defeat at Bull Run, and suddenly almost everyone questioned the president's competency. Now, even level-headed Northerns, such as famous editors Horace Greeley urged the president to negotiate peace. Others urged him to throw everything the North had into an immediate blow to crush the South, even though the army was not ready for this. On and on this went, the pressure continually mounting as the North failed to deliver a single solid victory until finally General Ulysses S. Grant finished off the siege at Vicksburg in 1863, followed soon by the victory at Gettysburg under General George Meade. Now, suddenly, Lincoln was hailed as a genius, but some 6 months later, as Grant got bogged down in his pursuit at the Confederate Army under General Robert E. Lee and the casualties mounted, the sense of panic returned. Once again, Greeley urged negotiation with the South. Lincoln's re-election that year seemed doomed doomed. He had become immensely unpopular. The war was taking too long. Feeling the weight of all this, in late August of 1864, Lincoln finally defeated a letter spelling out the terms of peace he would offer the South. But the very night he felt ashamed for losing his resolve and hide the letter in a drawer. But that very night he felt ashamed for losing his resolve and hid the letter in a drawer. The tide had to turn, he felt, and the South would be crushed. Only a week later, General William Tecumseh's sermon marched into Atlanta, and all the doubt about Lincoln suddenly vanished for good. And all the doubt about Lincoln suddenly vanished for good. Through long term thinking, Lincoln had correctly gauged the relative strength and weakness of the two sides and how the war would eventually trend. Everyone else got caught up in the day by day reports of the progress of the war. Some wanted to negotiate, others to suddenly spend up the effort, but all of this was based on momentary swings of fortune. A weaker man would have given is into such pressure and the war would have ended very differently. A weaker man would have given into such pressures and the war would have ended very differently. The writer Harriet Beecher Stowe, who visited Lincoln in 1864, later wrote of him surrounded by all sorts of conflicting claims, by traitors, by half-hearted, timid men, by bordered statesmen and free statesmen, by radical abolitionists and conservatives. He has listened to all, waited the words of all, waited, observed, yielded, now here and now there, now here and now there, but in the main kept one inflexible, honest purpose and drawn the national ship through. Kept one inflexible, honest purpose and drawn the national ship through. Lincoln provides the model for us all and the antidote to the fever. Lincoln provides the model for us all and the antidote to the fever firsthand. ये एग्जाम के लिए नहीं है, ऐसे नॉर्मल बुक्स है जो पढ़ रही हूँ। बोल सकते हैं कुछ ज़्यादा ही पढ़ना नहीं है। कामोगेलू क्या लिखा है, रामाफोको, ये कैसे नाम है पता नहीं। ये डोंट नाम तो नहीं, कुछ और ही है। एटलीस्ट भाई गजब सेंस ऑफ ह्यूमर है डीबी के नेक्स्ट। हम ऐसा नहीं किए थे, स्किप नहीं किया, पढ़ लिए। हाँ चार्ज कर सकते हो, कॉमेडियन हो तो कर सकते हो। तेरी नेक्स्ट लेवल का। हाय सॉरी, ठीक है, मंथ एंड में सैलरी पहुंच जाएगी पे। अप्लाई तो कर रहे हैं, लेकिन सेंस ऑफ ह्यूमर बहुत अच्छा है। कौन थे ना? हाँ, ये हो गया। ये हो गया। First and foremost, we must develop patience, which we like a muscle. First and foremost, we must develop patience, which is like muscles that require training and repetition to make it strong. Lincoln was a supremely patient man. When we face any kind of problem or obstacle, we must follow his example and make an effort to slow things down and step back. Wait a day or two before taking action. Second, when faced with issues that are important, we must have a clear sense of our long-term goals and now and how to attain them. Second, we face with issues that are important, we must have a clear sense of our long-term goals. A clear sense of our long-term goals and how to attain them. Part of this involves assessing the relative strength and weakness of the parties involved. Such clarity will allow us to withstand the constant emotional overreaction of those around us. Such clarity will allow us to withstand the constant emotional overreaction. Allow us with the allow us to withstand the constant emotional overreaction of those around us. Finally, it is important to have faith that time will eventually prove us right and to maintain our resolve. Finally, it is important to have faith that time will eventually prove us right and to maintain our resolve. Lost in trivia, you feel overwhelmed by the complexity of your work. You feel the need to be on top of all the details and globe trends so you can control things better. But you're drowning in information. It is hard to see the proverbial forest for the trees. This is a sure sign that you have lost a sense of your priorities, which facts are more important, what problems or details are require what problem or details require more attention. The icon for this syndrome would have to be King Philip II of Spain, 1527 or 1598. He had a prodigious appetite for paperwork and for keeping on top of all facts of the Spanish government. This gave him a feeling of being in control, but in fact, in the end, it made him lose control. He fused over the placement of toilet in his new palace at Escorial and their precise distance from the kitchen. He spent days deliberating on how exactly particular members of the clergy should be addressed and remunerated. But sometimes he would fail to pay proper attention to important report on spies and national security issues. But sometimes he would fail to pay proper attention to important reports on spies and national security issues, proving over endless reports on the street of the Turkish army, proving over endless report on the street of proving over endless report on the street of Turkish army. He believed it showed signs of great weakness and decided to launch war against the Turk. Somehow he had misjudged the war would last 18 years. Huh? Okay. The war would last 18 years. Already. Have no definite resolution and bleed Spain of money. Have no definite resolution and bleed Spain of money. A similar process occurred in relation to England. The king had to read every single report on the state of the English and navy. The support of the people for Queen Elizabeth, every minute detail about the country's finances, and the support for Queen Elizabeth, every minute detail about the country's finances, every minute detail about the country's finances, and shoreline defenses. Based on years of such studies, in 1588 he decided to launch his armada against England, feeling certain that having made the armada large enough, Spain would prevail, but he failed to pay enough attention to weather reports, the most critical factor of all. For a storm at sea would spell the destruction of the armada. For a storm at sea would spell the destruction of the Armada. He also failed to realize that by the time he had compiled and assimilated enough information on the Turk or on England, the situation had actually changed. So while he seemed extremely detail oriented, he was never quite on top of anything. So while he seemed extremely So while he seemed extremely detail oriented, he was never quite on top of everything. Over the years, Philip strained his mind with so much reading that he had frequently headache and dizzy spells. His thinking was definitely impaired, and he made decisions that ended up leading directly to the irreversible decline of the Spanish Empire. In some ways, you are probably more like King Philip II than you would like to imagine. If your life you are more in your life you are more than likely paying attention to some details that seem immediately important to you while ignoring the weather report that will doom your project. Like Philip, you tend to take information without considering your priorities. Like Philip, you tend to take information you take like Philip, you tend to take in information without considering your priorities. What really matter in the end, but the brain has its limits. Assimilating too much information leads to mental fatigue, confusion, and feeling of helplessness. Everything began to seem equally important: the placement of toilet and a possible war the turks Turks. What you need is a mental filtering system based on a scale of priorities and your long term goal. Knowing what you want to accomplish in the end will help you need out the essential from the non essential. Knowing what you want to accomplish in the end will help you weed out the essential from the non-essential. You do not know, you do not have the, like, you do not have to know all the details. Sometimes you need to delegate. Let your subordinate handle the information gathering. Remember that greater control over event will come from realistic assessment of the situation. Precisely what is made most difficult by a brain submerged in trivia. I also. The far-sighted human. Most of us live within a relatively narrow time frame. Most of us live within a relatively narrow time frame. Most of us live within a relatively narrow time frame. Most of us live within a relatively narrow time frame. We generally associate the passage of time with something negative. We generally associate the passage of time with something negative, aging and moving closer to death. We generally associated the passage of time with something negative, aging and moving closer to death. Instinctively, we recoil from thinking too deeply about the future and the past. For this remind us of the passage of time in relation to the future, we may try to think about our plans a year or two from now. But our thinking is more like a daydream, I wish than deep analysis. A wish than deep analysis. In relation to the past, we may have a few fond or painful memories from childhood and later years, but in general, the past baffles us. In relation to the past, we may have a few fond or painful memories from childhood and later years, but in general, the past baffles us. I feel confused. We change so much with each passing year that who we were 5, 10, 20 years ago might seem like a stranger to us. We don't really have a cohesive sense of who we are. A feeling of connection between the 5-year-old and 35-year-old version of ourselves. Who make you feel unwanted? I no, never. Not wanting to go too far in either direction. We mostly live within the present. We react to what we see and hear, and to what we react to what we see and hear, and to what others are reacting to. We live for immediate pleasure to distract us from the passage of time and make us feel more alive. But we pay our price for all this. Depressing the thought of death and aging creates a continual underlying anxiety. We are not coming to terms with reality. Continually reacting to event in the present put us on a roller coaster ride. Up and down we go with each change in fortune. This can only add to our anxiety as life seems to pass so quickly in the immediate rush of event. Your task as a student of human nature and someone aspiring to reach the greater potential of the human animal is to widen your relationship to time as much as possible and slow it down. This means you do not see the passage of time as an enemy, but rather as a great ally. Each stage in life has its advantages. Those of youth are most Each stage in life has its advantages. Those of youth are most obvious. Those of youth are most obvious, but with age comes greater perspective. Aging does not frighten you. Death is equally your friend. It uh, it motivates you to make the most of each moment. It gives you a sense of urgency. It gives you a sense of urgency. Time is your great teacher and master. This affects you deeply in the present. Awareness that a year from now, this current problem you are experiencing will hardly seem so important. Awareness that a year from now, this current problem you are experiencing will hardly seem so important will help you lower your anxiety and adjust your priorities. Lower your anxiety and adjust your priorities. Knowing that time will reveal the weaknesses of your plan. Knowing that time will reveal the weaknesses of your plan, you become more careful and deliberative with them. In relation to the future, you think deeply about your long-term goals. They are not vague dreams but concrete objectives, and you have mapped out a path to reach them. In relation to the past, you feel a deep sense of connection to your childhood. Yes, you are constantly changing, but this change are on the surface and create the illusion of real change. In fact, your character was set in your earliest year, along with your inclination towards certain activities, your likes and dislikes. As you get older, this character only becomes more apparent. Feeling organically connected to what you were in the past gives you a strong sense of identity. Feeling organically connected to who you were in the past gives you a strong sense of identity. You know what you like and dislike, you know who you are. This will help you maintain your self love, which is so critical in resisting the descent into deep narcissism. And in helping you to develop empathy, also you will pay greater attention to the mistakes and lesson of the past, which those who are locked in the present tend to repress. Like everyone, you enjoy the present and its passing pleasure. You are not a monk. You connect to the trends, to the moment, and to the current flow of life. But you derive even greater pleasure from reaching your long term goals and overcoming the adversity. But you know, but you derive even greater pleasure from reaching your long term goals and overcoming but you derive even greater pleasure from reaching your but you derive even greater pleasure from reaching your long-term goals. What you derive even greater pleasure from what you derive even greater pleasure from reaching your long-term goals and overcoming adversity. This expanded relationship to time will help a definite effect on you. This expanded relationship to time will have a definite effect on you. It will make you calmer, more realistic, more in tune with the things that matter. It will also make a superior strategist in life, able to resist people's inevitable overreaction to what is happening in the present and to see further into the future. A potential power that we human have only begun to tap into. A potential power that we humans have only begun to tap into. The years teach much which the days never know. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Okay, tell me about yourself. Not really, no. Tell. I'm eagerly waiting for you. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Married bachelor. Hmm. Quite funny. I will tell about myself maybe another day because it's quite too late now. Okay. Tata. See you tomorrow. Tata. Bharat.